Hey guys, how are you doing? I wanted to make a video here. You might hear a little bit of wind and some rain in the background because I'm outside, but I wanted to make a video discussing a topic that seems to be getting some traction and I think causing some arguments. And unfortunately, I don't think that it's as controversial as what it sometimes comes across as. And that's the topic of modern jazz guitar, or just modern jazz and the label of what that means. I gotta tell you, for me personally, the feedback that I usually get when it comes to the style of jazz that I do has been labeled as modern. And that has to do not only with the compositions, but also the style of my playing. And I can attribute a lot of that, of course, to the people I listen to. For a good while, I remember when I was in undergrad, a good while I was listening to, I guess what you term is more the old school, excuse me, old school players. I was listening to a lot of Tal Farlow, Jimmy Rainey, his son Doug Rainey, who of course has a very similar sound. Jimmy Bruno, who's a fabulous guitar player. The reason why I went to UR, it's because Jimmy was on the roster there. So, I mean, there's some great guitarists, and I was listening to not only them, but also older school players, Oscar Peterson and Charlie Parker, I know Coltrane's, that's a whole other category right there because of the advances that Coltrane had made, and in the brief time he was here on Earth. So, with that said, I found that when I went to do the audition for grad school and I made a recording of myself and I listened back, I was heavy into that sound of like the bebop guitar playing, and I respect it. I respected it a lot then. I still do. And actually, at that time, I respected the older style more than the so-called new style, modern style. I couldn't stand to hear a lot of the stuff that was being played, and this is a broad statement, but like all of the dissonant sounds that I was hearing, and the fact that the tunes were not, those standard American songbook type tunes. But then something clicked, and I started to listen to, I'm trying to think who it was. There was a couple guitarists that I started to listen to, and one saxophone player in particular that I think kind of pushed me a little bit. Now, of course, I'd listened to Holdsworth before. Holdsworth gets thrown out a lot as far as the modern jazz type, Frank Gambale. I listened to Al Di Meola, but this was still early on. I knew who these guys were. I would say that the guitar player that really done it for me was Jonathan Kreisberg and Adam Rogers and Ben Monder. And as far as pianist, I mean, I'm not going to go through every person, but as far as a pianist, Brad Meldau was one that started to be drawn to my attention, Bobo Stinson. And then sax players, of course, it had to be, for me, the one that really, and some may argue whether or not this is modern jazz or whatever the label is, Jerry Bergunzi. Jerry Bergunzi, was listening to him. There was a summer right after grad school where I was listening to him or Jonathan Kreisberg. Those were the two. That's the stuff that I was listening to. And of course, John Abercrombie. There were some players I really didn't dig so much at that time. I'm not going to go into that, but as time has went on, I've kind of gotten more into it. But here's the thing. What I have found in my experience through booking gigs and just trying to promote what I do, you have to be careful with those labels. And I find that it can become very limiting to use those labels. I have used the label modern jazz and have been rejected from playing gigs. Or, I've been told maybe I should use a different labeling. That way maybe it'll draw more people. Regardless of that, people that listen to my music, we do cover standard tunes. We may cover them a little bit different, maybe not a Frank Sinatra rendition, maybe not the older style way of playing it, but we play standard tunes. And the original tunes that I do play, I find that they are very accessible to the average listener, and that's based on the feedback that I've gotten from, people just listening to the music and coming up afterwards and commenting. So, and that's not me trying to showboat or say, look at me and what I'm able to do. It's not that. It's just the truth that that's the response that we get. People really enjoy it, and that label makes it very difficult sometimes, I think. And you start to find, there's been a couple times where, you throw that kind of a label out or people recognize that. And then, I've had responses where, maybe, your music is not commercial enough. I mean, what does that mean? Commercial jazz? Smooth jazz. Let's not talk about that. Something you may like, smooth jazz, but jazz rock, jazz fusion. What does it matter? It doesn't matter. It's just another phase. You can't throw these terms out. I don't think that they're useful. And like I said, some of you use these terms. I use these terms too. Sometimes that's the best way that we have, at least right now, to describe what it is exactly that, we're putting out. Because people do want to know, how do you describe your music? But I've found that all it does is more than not, it creates this sense of, oh, that's what you are? Okay, well, that's not what we're looking for, or that, I don't like that type of music. But let the people listen. If they listen to it, you start to find that maybe their appreciation of it changes quite a bit. So as far as these terms go with modern jazz or, standard or old school or whatever it is, I get it, but then again, it's just limiting. And this style of music has so many facets to it that you're not going to be able to tell people in a single, one word, 2-3 word, little description, modern jazz guitar. People, they don't understand. A lot of people, I don't think, understand what that means, right? And that could be a topic for a whole nother video or a whole other conversation of, well, it's not that popular of an art form, or along those lines, so that's why, the average person doesn't understand. But it's mainly put it out there and let people hear it. I think that that's the most important thing that you can do, is just put it out there and let people hear it and let them judge whether or not they want to call it, old school, modern, whatever they want to call it. And like I said, the purpose of this, I'm just throwing out some thoughts that I have on it, and in no way is it meant to offend anybody. I'm not trying to down people that use those terms, because I use the terminology myself. I get it. Sometimes that's what we have to do in order to kind of, give people an idea of where we're coming from and the style of music that we create. But don't let those terms pigeonhole you. Don't let those terms, put you in a state of mind where you have to write in a certain way, play a certain way. Just do what you do. You know, play the way that you feel like playing. Don't get caught up in all these debates and arguments about this stuff. All right, guys. Stay tuned for more videos. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Also, let me throw out real quick. I have some new material on musiclessons.com. Told you that wind's kicking up. I have some new material on musiclessons.com, and I'll put a link up to that in the description below. But thanks a lot, guys, for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.